Emma Donoghue has made a film about which of these subjects? No, it's not Canadian beavers. The answer is lesbian mums.
So then, thank you very much. We're going to wrap up this morning's show by reconvening our Wright Reads book club. Emma Donoghue's novel Room is what we're discussing. If you've read it, love to hear your thoughts, and you can email them to us right now. Tracy Ann Biggins and myself are also joined by this lovely lady here, Maya Ninel, a 24-year-old student from London who, rather frighteningly from my point of view, has just finished her master's degree in journalism. A proper journalist. What were you reading before?
I was, that would be John Updike's The Grapes of Wrath.
Steinbeck.
Yeah.
One of my favourites.
Oh, yeah?
Dust Bowl America. American fiction, do you like that?
Yeah, I'm reading all American short stories at the minute, some modern Tobias Wolff, John Updike.
And I must admit, I'm a big fan of American literature as well. Let me tell you a bit about Room, then, shall I? Written entirely from the perspective of Jack, a 5-year-old boy, the story begins as he and Ma celebrate his 5th birthday at home. Home being an 11-foot by 11-foot lead-lined shed that they've been imprisoned in, because Ma, you see, was kidnapped by a chap called Old Nick 7 years ago and has been locked in the room ever since. Now, Old Nick rapes her, Fritzl style, and Jack is the result of one of these liaisons. To protect Jack, for want of a better phrase, Ma tells him the only things inside the room, only the things inside the room are real, and that everything else, everything he sees on television, for example, isn't. Eventually, though, Ma tells Jack the truth, and they escape. This is about 2/3 of the way through, which is pertinent. And I think also pertinent to our discussion is the fact the book was written after the story of Josef Fritzl and daughter Elizabeth came to light, but before J.C. Lee Duggard was found. So, in terms of timing, well, I don't think this book's arrival could be any better. But what kind of insight did it give you into what these poor people went through in real life, Maya?
It was sort of less sensationalist than the media. It wasn't really going into Ma's experience, because it's told by the boy. It talked more about the sort of day-to-day life of living in a room and raising a child and that kind of situation.
The thing I was struck by, and it was right from the very beginning, was the style of writing here, because it's written very much from the perspective of a 5-year-old. We'll find out from Tracy Ann in a little while how close she thinks that is. But stylistically, I felt that she'd made an amazing effort, Emma Donoghue, to put us into that room very convincingly. Would you go along with that?
Definitely. You really felt like claustrophobic in the room, and it was a sort of really modern-day sort of crime, so she's told it in a sort of modern-day way, and it was quite almost dirty after.
Well, yeah, you got it too. I mean, you literally, it gets under your skin. And there's fantastic detail as well, because everything in the room, because there's so few things in the room, has a capital letter. So, you know, the light, the TV, they've all got their special names. Yeah. Did you find it a comfortable read, Biggins?
I found it a very uncomfortable read. I love reading, and I was saying earlier in the week that what I found distressing about this book, I like chapters, because I find that you can get to chapter 1 and you go to chapter 2, and you know, I like short chapters. Here, there's no chapters to speak of. There's just 3 sections. I found it...
Do you not find, though, that if you're stuck in a room where time is impossible to keep tabs on because you're in a room all the time, I thought that worked quite well as a device. There is no beginning or end. You're in a room, no sense of time.
No, but that was one of the problems I had, too, with the book. I felt, you know, that
But that's good, isn't it? That it brings you into the environment.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I found that environment so uncomfortable. I mean, I really did, and I agree with you, you know. I wanted to go, every time I read the book, I wanted to go have a good bath or a good shower, because it seemed to stick to me. The boy reminded me of a ventriloquist's dummy, too. It was a bit like magic.
Well, again,
because
if you imagine his only input has come from Mum,
exactly,
he is ultimately just going to reflect everything she says. There's no other input there other than television.
And when he sits on her knee and things, and you know, and looks at her breasts and what have you, it's a very, very strange sensation.
Yes. What did you think, Tracy Ann, of Jack as the narrator? You know, Anushka's what, 4? So not far off.
I actually think it's a rather brilliant book because I think it takes it. I think it's beyond the Fritzl thing. I think narrating it in the voice of a 5-year-old, which I thought was a very, very accurate. She really got into the mindset of how a child would experience and how a child would understand. But once they leave the room. It becomes a metaphor and a parable about how a total innocent sees the wider world outside of the room. Indeed. And that is what is so... I mean, I started reading it, found it so painful, so uncomfortable, and thought it was very sensationalist, and I didn't want to carry on reading. I found it dirty.
You thought it was sensationalist?
I started thinking, oh, my goodness, this is completely cashing in after the first couple of pages. And then I forced myself to go through, and then something kind of happened in my head where I think it's an absolutely brilliant book. I really do. I think if you can force yourself through it, it's got something of the Cormac McCarthy in it, about an innocent coming into a world, having gone through a horrible experience and learning something about, teaching us something about the world that we live in.
OK, now, we have had, once again, a fantastic response from you guys at home, and I think it's fair to say the book has struck a chord with many of you. A lady called Angela Epsworth emailed to say how much she liked the character. Next to Jack, my favourite character is Stepper, who proves to be a supportive and calm character, helping Jack to adapt to his new world. The book changes direction, though, when they leave and eventually escape from the shed, from the room. A lot of people off camera here, because everyone on the team has read it as well, felt that that was the point Emma Donoghue started to lose them a little. How did you find the last third of the book when they're out in the real world, Maya?
I'd have to agree. I think it kind of lost, like, intensity as we got towards the end, and I found myself sort of flipping through a lot quicker and found it a lot less interesting than the beginning.
But is that not because inside the room is the experience we have no understanding of? When they emerge into the real world, we are familiar with everything they're seeing, and there's not as much charm or interest to be had in hearing a 5-year-old boy tell us what we already know about the world.
Well, that's the thing. We still were hearing from the 5-year-old boy, and I quite wanted to hear from the mother at that point, how she felt being released, how she got back in. And it was more... almost too much of the little boy towards the end. Because
Ma, I mean, she essentially disappears for the last third of the story.
I know. You see, having not liked the claustrophobia of the book, I then, you know, I agree totally with you. I thought that it was a cop-out to leave the room.
Really?
And then when they come back at the end, and which I did find rather very distressing, was the way that he said goodbye to everything. You know, he said goodbye to the wall, he said goodbye to his bed, he said goodbye...
I thought this was entirely logical. I'm not going to... I just think it made entire sense to me that he'd want to go back because that's all he knows. Tracy Ann?
I fundamentally disagree, because I think once they leave the room, how do you take a little being whose entire experience has been in this 11 by 11 room and take him outside? And so it's how he sees things, and Ma does disappear because Ma has been his world for all that time that they were in the room, and she's had to survive and keep them alive, and she almost does disappear into I won't give it away, but you know, there's a twist as to what happens to Ma because she ceases to become his god and his world as other influences and factors come in. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
I just want to wrap this up. To me, it's a book that is brilliantly written, difficult and uncomfortable to read, and not necessarily something you'd want to read on the beach, but worth it all the same.
Well, I recommended it to my mother, and I don't think it is...
Do you like your mother?
I like my mother.
Just wanted to check. She didn't keep you locked in a room? No.
No,
so you recommended it. Biggins, would you recommend it?
No, I wouldn't.
Really? You didn't chime...
It didn't do anything for me, and I thought to begin with I was going to really get into it, but I found it very repetitious.
OK, last word from you, Tracy.
It's a painful book. I mean,
yes,
it's properly painful. It really is quite visceral. So it's not an easy read, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, I found it fascinating. If you fancy reading Room yourself, you can buy it from our website, £7.29, £5 off the cover price. And I have to say, I'm really excited about next month's book, Kate Atkinson's latest crime novel. Started early, took my dog. I love Kate Atkinson as well. I've read everything. And there's a tenner off if you buy it from our website right now. Anyway, that is all we've got time for. Huge thank you to Maya here for joining us this morning. Best of luck with your career as well in journalism. And to you guys as well, a wonderful week. Ladies and gents, give it up for this wonderful book club. Next week, Gail Porter and Bellamy's People star Rhys Thomas formed a panel, while special guests include Skin from Skunk Anansie, She's Back, and Paralympian Ade Adepitan. Have a lovely weekend. See you Monday. Bye for now.